Well, speaking of making light work, this has been a fantastic episode, but I got one more woo-woo story, kind of a history too, if you guys are ready for it. Kind of ties a lot of things together. I've been saving this one for just the right week, and I think this is it. So let me go over a couple things because I was reading some of these stories on Zero Hedge, and I caught a particular call out when I was looking at Iran working with the Saudis and China with deals. But I keep hearing the phrase Syria come up more and more and more. And they even said right here, why is the U.S. military still in Syria? Do any of you guys know or have any thoughts as to what the real reason is that the U.S. is still in Syria? Any guesses? Anything?
Biblically, yeah. It's really, really relevant. It's Holy Land.
It's not biblical. It's economic. So let me
don't know then. Why? Can you enlighten me? Wait. What bucket? What bucket?
This is bucket one. So bucket one. So first,
so Jesse, we've got lingo here. Bucket one is like this is really happening. Biden signed this executive order. Bucket two is like he signed it because these companies are obviously making these moves behind the scenes and they're giving him money and supporting that initiative. And bucket three is because they're from Mars and they're aliens.
Yeah. So wild theories are in bucket three.
Okay.
So this is more factual
right here.
So this is bucket one. So bucket one. Why? And I'm sorry for the small print. It's I'm see if I can get
Rothschilds.
So this is Red Shield. Only three. Look, this says only three countries because I don't have the whole thing. But I remember going down this rabbit hole. If you look right here at this list of 7 countries that used to have or do have a central bank that is not owned or associated with the Red Shield family, the Rothschilds, look at this list. It is basically a hit list of going back to the economic hitman. We'll talk about that in a moment. Afghanistan, we were there. Iraq, we know we were there. Sudan, not too much, but Libya, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Cuba, they had a missile crisis that impacted the U.S. 50 years ago. We continue to struggle with North Korea, and we have sanctions and issues with Iran time and time again. So Syria is part of this list as well. I don't know why it's not on this one, but Syria does not have they're not associated with the Bank of International Settlements either. So if you go and read the story behind Libya, let me pull that one up.
Man, go back to that map you showed at the beginning, Jeff.
I told you it was biblical, Jeff. I told you that was the answer. I was right.
Well, did he? Wait. So now there's only 3. So some of those got checked off the list.
Well, I found a couple other maps that I think Bolivia was on one. I think Russia's another.
Like ostracized by Brazil right around it, right?
Yeah, and it's landlocked, so that's another issue. But if you go back to basically, there's a lot of things going around the Middle East right now to get away from the U.S. and create their own trade routes. But Iran, Iraq, all these countries, like right along this direction here, they don't have these Rothschild central banks. And Syria is another one. I think that's right here. This is Syria. If you can see my mouse bouncing up and down, but it's right next to Iraq. So and if you go through the story of Gaddafi from, what was that, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when we went in there, the reason that we went after Gaddafi, and this is bucket one now because this comes from WikiLeaks. This is written in 2016, but when WikiLeaks released the Hillary's emails, we got this information that says in the emails, going back to what Dylan said earlier, the real reasons for the attack on Gaddafi were they've been dealt most directly by America's famous reformed economic hitman, John Perkins, who wrote the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And he pointed out that this was an attack because they had the resources of oil and gold, and they had a central bank that's 100% state owned. It's not associated with the IMF or anything else. They had 144 tons of gold. So that's why they went into Libya. That's why they're in Syria. This is about defending their dollar, and the oil is secondary, but they're defending the dollar and the financial system more than anything else.
Yep. Wow, that's cool. What a cool piece of information to remind us of, because you're right.
All right. So, yeah. I
love Patrick, it when you geek out like that, Jeff. Great job. I'm so proud of you. You're my friend.
He had all that rile. I'm like, well, he knows what he's talking about there. That's good.
I told you it's fun. Like that's why we defined bucket 1, 2, and 3, because sometimes Jeff will go off on these rabbit hole trails, and I like struggling.
Sometimes I like bucket 3.
Yeah, but bucket 3 usually frightens me a little too much. So we go back to bucket 2. I would go, hey, wait. what bucket are we in? He'll be like, this is 3. And then I'm like, okay, great. Probably
so
not.
Remember when I had that thought that I lost my train of thought a little bit ago? Okay, and it had to do with what we see versus what has been there for quite a while. I can remember when I was a young kid in the late 80s, and yes, I'm 44 years old, so I was around in the 80s, and I saw, and I had a calendar of the SR-71 Blackbird. Remember this biplane? And I thought this was a new piece of technology, and I had a poster of it. And that sucker had been around for 25 or 30 years before that, right?
Yeah.
Hey, creeps me out the same way. So going through all of this conversation, that was what I was going back. We were touching on the AI component, was what do they have that we don't know about versus the little tip that we see now?
Yeah.
Already been in.
And it's amazing if you go back to where the SR-71 started 20, 25 years before. I mean, you're looking at the 40s and 50s, which is pretty much the real technological advancements in the 20th century. Something's dramatically happened in the Southwest in the late 40s. That's kind of in bucket 3, a little bit in bucket 2. Roswell.
Area? Yeah.
Yeah, it's an area as well.
It's an area.
51 of them. Yeah.
It's below 58 and above 56.
Yeah.
I want
to say something.
Yeah, I want to just share this book again. So it's Soft War by Jason Lowry. And the reason why it's focused on Bitcoin as a new frontier of warfare using non-kinetic energy projection in the form of miners to protect property and secure property. And the necessity of that to us basically stalemating ourselves with nuclear kinetic energy, right? You can't go down that route. We can't use that to determine who's the bigger, badder power anymore, because without destroying us all. And so we need a new frontier to engage in these power displays. Fascinating book, but the reason why the prompt for this was when you shared the story about us invading Libya and to really basically take control of their central bank and their gold, is that that happens, and that's happened throughout history of countries invading places with resource caches or honeypots and taking them over for themselves. And so something that is cool about Bitcoin, because we talked about earlier, it's always fun to compare them all, is that you can't do that with Bitcoin in the same way. It's not feasible to go in and just start taking Bitcoin from everyone, because it can be sent around the world instantaneously to anywhere. So it's very, very hard to do that. And that's a really, I think, a very promising dynamic, because the last thing we want is more war, more destruction, more death, more violence to satisfy the desires of, families like perhaps you mentioned before, Jeff. So I just want to point out this book, Soft War.
That's a great point. And I think that what you're saying is like, you can't go out and go like after the gold or oil deposits with Bitcoin unless you were going after the miners that we talked about earlier. Like that's really like deposits of Bitcoin if you were to go after them. But this throughout history. Like we didn't talk much about Iraq, but the weapons of mass destruction, that was the excuse for us to go in there. What if they really did exist, but they were against the financial system of destruction of the financial system, because Saddam Hussein wanted to sell his oil for euros, not dollars. That's why we went there. All right.
Is that bucket one? Is that bucket one?
Oh, that's bucket one. Yeah, that's absolutely bucket one. Saddam. It's widely known that Saddam was trying to sell oil in Europe. There you go, Patrick. Patrick said something. I was in bucket one. Thank you, Patrick. I want to stop right there.
Because it's true, Jeff. It's why it's bucket one. I can agree that gravity is bucket one. Water is bucket one. I mean, there are ducks that fly. That's bucket one. Everything is bucket one.
That gravity is not bucket one, by the way. But that's
some people think birds aren't real.
Gravity is bucket one. I'm sorry,
and
Jeff.
What is a bucket? If we can't decide what a woman is, what's a bucket?
They're in bucket two.
That's bucket three.
You guys have confused me, and I'm not going to go there with you guys, because you cannot convince me what is not true is not true. So there we go. I am telling you, gravity exists because if I drop it, it falls. Every single time it does it. Jeff?
The theory of gravity may not be the complete description of what it is. That's what it is.
Sure. I believe in a God who's bigger than me, and I don't get it all either. That's cool. I believe that.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to go down the gravity rabbit hole this conversation.
No.
But the Earth is not flat. We won't go there.
Who believes we landed on the moon?
Define landed on the moon.
Seriously?
On the moon.
Yeah.
Stop jumping around in the flag.
I believe that we've
Hilton,
been
are
to
you
the
not
moon.
raising your hand?
I believe that we've been to the moon, but not in 1969.
So raise your hand, Jeff. Did we go to the moon?
The question was, have we been to the moon? I said, I think the answer is yes, but not in 1969.
But isn't it true that we can't go back to the moon right now?
We don't have the technology to go back to the moon.
We lost the technology to go back to the moon, right?
We have more technology in our microwaves in our kitchen.
Look it up. I went down this rabbit hole like a few weeks ago. Someone made a comment that we don't have the technology to go back to the moon. We can't go back to the moon right now.
How sarcastic is that? And they say that there's more technology and more processing speed in one of those Hallmark cards that you open up that play music and that little computer chip that plays.
This should be able to get me to the moon. The technology in this should be able to get me to the moon.
Come on, Jeff.
But, you know,
come on, Jeff, don't be silly. We can go to the moon. What are you guys saying? When you see
mice running around the edges of rockets in space on a Tesla experiment a couple of years ago, because there's a mouse just running around in space around the edge of the rocket in space, you start to question things.
That's funny.
Jesse, do you believe that we landed on the moon?
You know, I've chosen to watch a lot of those documentaries, and there is a compelling argument as to how it could potentially have been staged. I'm not saying we did or didn't yet. The evidence shows it may not have happened.
So it's
landing
on the moon, what else are you? I owe Tom a beer if you're right.
Here, I have a link.
There was a. This is
the woo-woo section, right, Jeff?
This is the woo-woo section. Yeah, this is exactly how I act during a woo-woo section.
Yeah, pretty much. All right, so let me
show Dylan.
It's just
what?
Why can't we fly? We don't have a tall enough rocket now.
That doesn't make any sense. I just saw that. 36 stories? What the heck?
Today's rockets struggle to accomplish the same task. So just keep in mind, like, you know, Kennedy put the directive out there in the 60s that said we want to get to the moon by the end of the decade. Okay, we walked on the moon allegedly on July of 1969. That's kind of convenient that we beat everybody else there with 5 months to spare before the end of the decade.
What are you guys saying? Is this legit?
It's a thing. It's probably bucket 2. It's probably bucket 2, but maybe it's bucket 1.
But this is a technological story, right? This is just
are
like
we moving space landing on the bucket 2? Is that really what we just said?
Dylan is right. This is probably bucket 1. This happened. It didn't happen, Patrick. This is normal.
Well, basically, the question just made the reason why I posed the question is we were talking about moon landings and stuff, and you know, we're in the woo-woo section.
Whew.
And we're having fun with it. But I heard it was on some podcast. Someone said, we don't have the technology to go to the moon now. I was like, how is that possible? Like, we did this in the past. And it's just one of those things that, like, if you don't question and think about it, you just assume that we can just do those same things, but better now, because you look around and you have these supercomputers in your hands and all that. But when you really look into it, at least on the surface, it seems to be that a big issue is we haven't put the funding and resources into the training and development of a program to go specifically to the moon. And because we haven't allocated those funds and personnel to solve that problem or to advance upon that, it's just like if you don't go to the gym for a few weeks or a few months, your muscles start to atrophy. And so we don't have the things and systems in place to actually launch a program to take us to the moon. I think that's a big thing that I learned. And so I think there's an important lesson there beyond just the woo. It's just like, you know, what you don't focus on and what you don't use, it'll eventually decay over time. It just doesn't stay like perfect and improve itself always. But also there's some conspiracy to it as well. It's a kind of a fun rabbit hole to dive down that kind of makes you think and question things.
I like the gym analogy because if you used to be able to bench 400 pounds, but you did that 20 years ago and haven't been in the gym since, you do possess the ability to lift 400 pounds. You're just not ready to do it right now. And that's really where we're at with the space program decommissioning.
Maybe. I probably wouldn't do it though. What about the pyramids in Egypt, Patrick? I mean, we should have the technology today to be able to do that. Right? Joe Rogan said that if you placed 10 of those blocks every day, it would take you 600 years to build one of the Great Pyramids or the Great Pyramid.
I just love to listen to the stories of how they tell you that they really did it, which is like they made these blocks 300 miles away and rolled them on logs over here and then built it. I'm like, okay, sure that it happened. Okay.
So when I was growing up,
where?
In California, I went to an Egyptian church, and I believed that the way that the pyramids were built was because before Moses took our slave labor out of Egypt, we had slaves that built them. And all the cartoons that I saw depicting the story of Egypt and Moses led me to believe that the slaves were building the pyramids. So until last year, and I did math, I really believed that slaves built the pyramids. And then I did math. I've been to the pyramids. I'm telling you, I remember as I'm going through the pyramids, I remember walking up this certain part of one of the pyramids and felt like something was weird, man. Like it didn't feel right. And I noticed it too, because the person in front of me also stopped and like had this like weird pause. And as soon as I got there, I kind of felt this weird pause too. And I didn't think anything of it. Now, we don't have time for this. I mean, we don't have time for it. I just don't believe that. I don't believe pyramids are man-made. There, I said it. I said it. I believe it. I don't have a whole lot of evidence, but I tell you this right now. If aliens come to me, my belief is in God and Glocks. I am shooting them in Jesus' name. Pow, pow. Done. Every time. Gun and Glocks. God and Glocks. I don't want to see aliens, Terminators, zombies, Fauci, Biden, nobody. I don't want to see none of you. Just stay away.
Bucket 3 is now full.
Yes.
Well, guys, this has been a fantastic show. I want to get final thoughts, and then I want to share one or two things before we go, because it's been long, but I think it's worth noting. We will be sharing some of the links. I couldn't pull up the link on Joseph's Pantry right now, but I will include that in the show notes and the description as well. But let me share this real quick. I know that this is Jesse. I want to make sure that he gets a final word before we go. Jesse, it's been fantastic. You're always welcome back. What are your final thoughts? Please go to YouTube, find the Shielded Prepper, subscribe to him. It's great videos, prepping, just generalities, really good information out there. Jesse, final thoughts for today.
Yeah. So here's what I know. This is not what I think or what I feel. There are 1,000 other channels that talk about 3 ways to prepare oatmeal and 12 ways to can vegetables. And there's some amazing technical resources out there. And the desire of the Shielded Prepper is to remind us of why we're doing it and why it's important to think technically about that. Yet it all starts with our thoughts. As a man thinketh, so he is. We know that thoughts are the way that our emotions are produced, and our emotions are the only thing connected between us and actions. It's the results that come from the action. So thoughts produce emotions, emotions produce actions, and actions produce a result. It's the same cycle. So if we're having good thoughts and we're establishing these good thoughts and we're putting together plans to ensure we have food and water and we can cook food and we can produce energy, that we can protect ourselves, these are most fundamental. And then after we do that, we pay off debt. After we do that, we acquire precious metals and we hedge our wealth in other areas. And we must ensure we are preparing for our family right now with those simple things. Food insurance, water, cooking. These insurance policies are very expensive. They take a lot of time and effort, and we must start moving now. Because what's the great saying that says, I'd rather be 10 years early
than a day late.
You're going to feel really stupid if you've been hearing these things and knowing these things and haven't moved. So I'm encouraging people on the channel to move with fear. In Hebrews 11, verse 7, it says, Noah, being warned by God of things unseen, moved with fear and prepared an ark for the saving of his family. That's what happened. And they said in the end times, it'll be as if in the days of Noah, that there will be things that will be waxing worse and worse. And we're seeing our our world become worse and more toxic. So I intend on talking to people's hearts and to change the way that they're thinking about why to be prepared, not just 10 ways to do this and 5 ways to do this and this. So we must start with our thoughts, and our thoughts are going to flow through all the way to our actions, and those actions are going to produce a result. So we're starting with the top, which is up here.
Excellent, Jesse. Dylan, what are your final thoughts for today?
Man, I'm still hung up on the pyramids. But I think the big thing is just to reiterate that it is important that you think about when you do self-custody things, that you are smart and strategic and you have them safe and secured and protected, and to be prepared for the scenario. If the worst happens, what are you going to do?
Yeah. So. Awesome.
Patrick?
I mean, I'm just glad I don't owe reparations anymore, because clearly they didn't build the pyramids. So I'm good there. But no, I mean, guys, you guys know why I'm here. You guys know why we're here every day. We got to get ready for what's coming. If you guys feel it in your hearts, you're seeing it. No one is saying, yeah, guys, tomorrow things are going to be better. Let's just wait until tomorrow, until this happens. It looks really promising. Like, we're just not hearing a lot of that good stuff. So we got to take a moment and think about like what we can do today to be ready. Like, just one simple thing you could do on your way home. Just do it, right? Make a plan, get it done.
Yeah, and I'll close out with a couple things. First off, I think conversations like this, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I love this show where we just get together and talk like guys, and we just talk about things. We talk anything from politics to economy to woo-woo stuff and to religion. I want to share one more book. We're going to get a lot more things onto an Amazon store or something, but I think that this book, and this will resonate, I think, both with Patrick and Jesse, because I know that they're guys that are deep into the Bible, but we all know, I mentioned Cliff High many times as well. So Cliff High questions everything. I think everybody should question everything. And he goes a lot into the original source. So I'm going to share this book. And this is his favorite version of the Bible, which is called the Naked Bible. And this was translated by a guy by the name of Mauro Biglino. And he goes back to the original, I think it's Proto-Hebrew that he goes back to. And he leaves words that aren't translatable as the original. And there are plenty of things in there that are woo-woo that related, like things like that, God isn't necessarily directly called out. And he compares this to other works like the Torah. But one interesting thing of woo-woo that's in this is that they do not translate El or Elohim. I think so that is basically the single and the plural of the race that is allegedly the alien race that came down and helped build the pyramids. So that is something to think about, but don't believe what I say, but go and read this book. This is a guy who went to the original text and translated. He is so good at what he did that he had monks and other religious people asking for him to come work with him to do translations. So again, we got lots of things that we share. Question everything. Don't believe what we say. Don't believe what anybody else says. Go and do your own homework, do your own research, which we say in crypto all the time. Figure it out for yourself, but think for yourself. Critical thinking is a scarce resource too. So we want to leave you with that, and we want to make sure that you're prepared so you're not scared, and we will see you next time. Take care.